and welcome to History Through Fiction, the podcast. I'm your host, Colin Mustful, and today I'm thrilled to be joined by Lynn Cullen, author of the novel When We Were Brilliant. Hi, Lynn.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
So, in the excerpt that you read for this episode, Eve, the photographer, is meeting Marilyn at a merry-go-round. Tell us why they're at a merry-go-round and how that all inspired this novel.
Well, Marilyn Monroe, I'm going to go back even farther, approached Eve Arnold and in 1952, and she'd seen Eve Arnold's photos of Marlene Dietrich, and it will seem like hard for a modern audience to understand how different Eve Arnold's photos were of Marlene, but she was a photojournalist and she used no additional lighting. She just used whatever lighting was available. And, just she caught Marlena in a recording session. And these photos went worldwide, went huge. People were like, look at Marlena. She looks so different. And it was just really Marlena not in a studio, not in a, photography studio. So Marilyn saw these photos. And as you might know, Marilyn really is photos. She created herself out of photography. And she saw Eve Arnold's pictures of Marlene Dietrich, and she said to Eve at this party for John Huston, she said, uh, think, I saw what you did for Marlene, and I would like you to do that for me. Think what I could do for you. And that kind of set him off on a bad foot because Eve thought, who is this person thinking she could do something for me, this little starlet? But Marilyn persisted, and so they agreed to have a photo shoot. But Marilyn showed up and caused this big brouhaha at the beach, and Eve felt very disrespected that Marilyn wasn't looking uh, at Eve's talents. And so Marilyn came back and said, I want to do a photo session. And so Eve goes, fine. And she lived on Long Island, and Marilyn was visiting there right then. And she picked out a playground. And it wasn't just any playground, it was a rusted over, broken down, totally weedy playground. And there is where they met. And right off, um, Eve sees how she underestimated Marilyn. So it's at this, that was that was the scene.
So you talked about how Eve chose her locations and it wasn't in a traditional studio like most photographers. What do you know about the craft of photography? Do you have a photography background, or what were you able to learn in researching this novel about Eve and what made her photographs so genuine and well known?
Well, I had no background, and oftentimes, really, I'm thinking of all my books. I don't have background in the material. It's stuff I want to learn, questions I want to answer. I've always been interested in photography, but I got the idea for this book. I've always wanted to write about Marilyn Monroe. She's intrigued me since I was a kid. I could not figure her out, yet I was really drawn to her. So, as a writer, this is how I answer questions. I write a book around them. And so I was thinking I really would love to write around about Marilyn. And it occurred to me just a couple of years ago that what about photographers? Because I know Marilyn is all about her photos. And I thought, I'm going to, look at all the women photographers. There was only one of all her many photos, and that was Eve Arnold. That blew me away that there is only the one woman. And even more remarkable is if you put Eve's photos of Marilyn on a wall amongst all of Marilyn's other photos, you could pick them out. Marilyn just relates to her differently. And I think to answer your question, then, this is what makes Eve special. She she drew people out, and not by small talk or anything. She just let people be who they were. She always said, I let people give me what they want to give me. But I think people felt her empathy because she truly empathized with her subjects and was not judgmental. She was just there letting them show her. And that's what makes her work remarkable. And the other thing is, because she was a woman at a time when there were very few women photojournalists, very few. She was with Magnum, and she was the only woman photographer at that famous worldwide agency. And she was the only woman at Magnum, and you know, um, the only woman out there of her stature. And her stature wasn't high. It took her a while, but she was forced by magazines. They always said, "Oh, we want a woman's point of view. Let's get Eve," because she was the only woman. And so her subjects were women oftentimes. And for, I think, a large part of her career, she fought against that. She wanted to be, a photographer. Um, but it turned out that that was a blessing because here was this part of history and this part of humankind that so often took second place. And she was there to capture them, and it gave her a unique stature
Can
coming
you
back.
talk more about Eve Arnold and just the notion that she had such a long career, and yet as we sit here, I had obviously heard of Marilyn Monroe, but I had never heard of Eve Arnold. And yes, she's behind the camera, but why do you think her accomplishments are so diminished or overlooked, maybe, even though she had such a long, outstanding career?
I think really it's so basic. I think she was overlooked because she was a woman. And, the greats at her time, like she was with Robert Capa and Henri Cartier-Bresson and, these amazing photographers. She was amazing too, but it was just hard for her to get the spotlight. And honestly, I think that's most of it. It was just that she was a woman and not thought of first when it came to great photography. I think she's finding a place though now because I think the world is more open to
Mhm.
women photographers and everything else. But at any given time, there are exhibits of Eve Arnold's around the world. There was just one in Toronto. I visited one in London. Um, she's going to have a visit in the National Portrait Gallery in London next summer. They're going to be Marilyn photos because it's actually Marilyn's 100th birthday. It's her 100th year since her birth. And so the National Portrait Gallery in London is having Eve's work of Marilyn there. So she's finding her due. And it's kind of funny. It's taking now, years after she died, but even in her life, her first solo exhibition was in when she was age 68. And she got her awards and was given her OBE, in the English Empire, when she was in her 70s, 80s. So she was a late bloomer. It wasn't her fault. She was working since she was a young woman, but it just took time.
So, in writing about these two women in their time and place, their circumstances, what were you able to draw out? What historical truths that we don't see in the photos and we don't see in the Wikipedia page were you able to bring out for readers and develop?
Hmm. Um, Gosh, we're looking at the historical aspect. It just, those two women, they are just symbolic of how it was for women. Eve wanted to have this career, and it was a career that took her away from home. And it was really hard on her to leave her family. There was a safety net for her. Women didn't do this. I think her son was kind of puzzled. I think he was proud and puzzled about why am I alone? Um, and Marilyn, of course, just fought against. She played into the stereotypes of being a dumb blonde for a while. And when she got to know Eve, and I even she were developing at the same time, she decided, you know what, I want to be me more. And she tried to be a serious actress. And actually, she was. If you look at her in The Misfits, she was really quite good. And she was a serious artist. And she stopped even using the breathy voice for a while. Um, I think she went back to a little bit in her very last years because she was she was struggling. But both of the women were struggling against the strictures of being women. And it says a lot about how hard it was for them at the time. Plus, another mention, if you get to know Eve Arnold's photography, you you take the pulse of an era. She was really interested in civil rights before people were talking about it a lot. Um, in fact, she moved to England in 1961, I believe it was, because I think there were personal reasons, but also here the civil rights thing just really depressed her. She really couldn't stand how it was for some people here,
Hmm.
and so had to move abroad for a while. Actually, the rest of her life, I should say.
Sure. Well, we've talked about Eve and Marilyn. Let's talk a little bit more about your craft. You write a lot of biological fic or biographical fiction. Um,
I love that. Yeah,
t Tell me about your POV choice for this novel, really focusing in on Eve's point of view and even using second person for some of the narrative.
right. Um, early on, I knew I was going to do first person for Eve. It was her book, and I just felt like could get into her skin. Um, but I did not write her referring to Marilyn in second person all the way through the book. All the, when she's talking to about you, it's Marilyn. I didn't know this until I was about halfway through the book. I had written it, and then I made a mistake when I was typing away, and I referred to Marilyn instead of she when Eve was thinking about her. I referred to her as you. And I did it again on that page, and I thought, but that feels right. That feels really right. And so I thought, I don't like gimmicks for writing, and I feel like this could get gimmicky. And so I was pretty nervous, but I went back through and I just changed the whole book to second person, and it worked. And in fact, it helped me to finish the book because I realized what this was. This was Marilyn or Eve's love letter to Marilyn, and um, whatever, finding that point of view, which was, like I said, by accident, finding that is what opened the book up.
That's fascinating. Did your editor or agent have any reservations about that?
Yes, of course they did, because I even did, because like I said, it could be really gimmicky, and they both said in their own ways, well, we could try it.
Hmm.
But it just felt so right. And after a while, they could see that it was the way to go. But oh yes, they definitely had reservations about it.
What are some of the challenges of writing about people from the not so distant past? I know it's fictionalized, but there must be some concerns up front. How do you deal with those, and what do you have to change in order to publish something like this?
Well, those concerns are dealing with living descendants, and Um, and that is a concern. And I thought about that a lot. Uh, it's always nice to pick subjects where there's no family. But in this case, Eve is gone. Her son and her grandson live. And I thought of them the entire time I wrote because that was one of the reasons I wrote the book. I so felt for Eve and being a mother and being torn between being a mother, which you could tell from reading her books. I've read all her books. She's written, I don't know, a dozen or more photo books. And you could tell in her books that she loved her son, but she also had to do her work. You know, when Robert Capa died, at his funeral, his mother told Eve, she says in one of her books, she said that, she had no regrets about her son running into to the line of fire. She said, he was never mine, he was the world's. And I think that's what Eve understood. As painful as that is, she'd rather be her own, let alone her family's. But she's the world. When you have a gift like she had and something to say and that vision, you 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 have to be selfless. And that's the way I looked at her. But fortunately, I was nervous about this, and I had some contact with her grandson, Michael Arnold, who runs her website because Eve passed away, gosh, 2012. I'm so bad about numbers, and I don't even know exactly what year she
Yeah,
died.
that's what I read.
2012.
Yeah.
Excuse me. Anyhow, so I was very nervous, even though I'd contacted him and then I told him I was writing this book. And I didn't offer for him to read it because it was fiction. If it was a biography, I would want him to read it. But I was so mindful of it being truthful, but showing my respect for her, my genuine, deep respect for her, and burrowing into her skin, as I said earlier. Well, it turns out, and this was the happiest day I had. He loves the book, and he says it sounds like my grandmother speaking. And I can't, I'm gonna tear up here thinking about it. That meant everything to me. Because that's what I really strove for, to 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 have him see what it's my love letter to her and to Marilyn. And I'm so glad that he saw that.
Well, that's amazing. Congratulations. I'm sure
Thank
you'll
you.
also get lots of five-star reviews, but that's on another level, I imagine.
Yes, for sure. It really, like I said, that day I got that, I did sit down and cry. That made me so happy because I really did write this book thinking of him and his father. But that is back to your question. That is the difficult thing. I wish I could go back to writing books. I wrote books in the Spanish Renaissance and about Rembrandt, and it was easier. It's so much easier to do that.
Well, you're quite an accomplished author, but and your reading your bio goes all the way back to when you were a child traveling with your father, grandmother. Can you talk about that journey for you from being an inspired child to then actually when the rubber meets the road and you have to meet this industry and what that was like for you in order to kind of get over the obstacles that are required to become a published and acclaimed author like you are now?
Well, if you don't have any other choice, but um, and you have to write to survive. That's the only way to be a writer because it is hard. It's hard for me still to get books published. I don't just come up with an idea and say, "How about it?" and they, leap on it. I've struggled getting the right idea and have things rejected still. But from the start, I just knew this is the only thing I can do. I'm not good at anything else, nor do I want to do anything else. This is just me. And um, I I did not take a traditional path. I was an English major, but I didn't take writing classes. I only took a postgraduate couple of writing classes. Um, and I started out in children's books because I had three daughters in 4 years' time, and um, I did not have time to write books, but I knew I wanted to write, so I started writing children's books. I was introduced to them at my daughter's library. My oldest, when she was in kindergarten, the first thing I did was volunteer to work in the library, and I read middle grade novels there, and I thought these are great. There's some really great ones like Gary Paulson and Betsy Byers, Paula Fox. I mean, they wrote fantastic works. They're just aimed toward middle grade children. And I thought I could do this, and I did, but it took me about 7 years to get it down right. Um, and so as the kids got older, my kids got older, I did publish again. I'm always so terrible with numbers. This is why I write. I think I did 16 of the children's books, middle grade novels, picture books, young adult. And as the kids got older and I had more time, I went for my true love, which is writing historical novels, because I am a history nut. I love history because you know what? I love the people in history. I it's their stories. I don't care about wars and dates and all that stuff. I care about the people. They're fascinating, and what people did to survive, and how some people got on the top. And one thing I found from researching deeply when I have a book, these, legendary people are never anything remotely like their legends. I found this out with Mark Twain, for example, and um, Poe. He was a real shocker to me. So it was the learning. I love learning about people, and as I mentioned earlier, I write to answer questions and to learn. And so all this is just this hobby of sorts that I am just in- infatuated with. And fortunately, the stories get published. And I make that sound also, you know, dreamy and wishy. But you, one thing is about choosing subjects, that's where you have to be mindful. The writer not only has to love this subject, because you're going to be, in my case, living with it for about 3 years, um, but you have to be mindful that there's an audience for that. You know, really, someone really esoteric. I mean, sometimes you do see historical fiction books that do quite well, that are on a very remote figure, but generally, if you've done that, it has to be some story that speaks to everybody. You know, the story has to be really great. So
Sure.
that's the trick.
Well, congratulations just on following on through on your passions and making your hobby into your job. Um, have
Thank you.
you have you chosen the next person, historical figure to focus on? Are you working on something new?
I am. I'm always working on something because otherwise I'm absolutely miserable and I feel like a fish out of water. It's really it's my therapy, which is kind of hilarious because I also need therapy from from the stresses of writing, but it is I have to be doing it at all times. And I can't really say because as I mentioned, um, I don't always have my ideas accepted, and so I'm working right now with my agent on an idea, and we'll see if it flies with my editor.
Okay. Well,
So I'm hoping. I'm hoping.
yeah. Well, Lynn, congratulations on when we were brilliant, and thanks so much for joining me. It's been fascinating to talk to you about Eve Arnold and Marilyn Monroe.
Thank you very much. It's been a real pleasure.